If you're thinking that this is the year to embark on a debt freedom journey, financial independence journey, or even a financial freedom journey, then this video is for you. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing a strategy, some tips and tricks for embarking on one of said journeys that I mentioned a few moments ago. So I want to do this video because someone asked me to do a similar video, so it was a video request, but also because we are kind of like closer to the tail end of our debt freedom journey, but just in the complete thick of our financial independence journey. Technically two different paths, but they kind of all intertwine because to be financially independent, people normally want to be free of debt. So they're kind of all intertwined. But like I said, we're kind of on the back end of the debt freedom journey, but in the throes of our financial independence journey. So as a person who is not completely debt free, this is just a video that I felt might be helpful. So let's go ahead and start out with tip number one, or the first thing that I think that one should do when embarking on such a journey. The first thing that you have to do is forgive yourself for any decisions, specifically financial decisions, that you have made prior to now. None of it really matters in the grand scheme of things. Yes, of course, I feel like we all can think about a decision that we probably shouldn't have made. We probably all can think about a financial decision that we probably shouldn't have made, but we can't go back and change the future. So there's no point in kind of spending a bunch of time harping on what you should have done or could have done, but would have done, but rather thinking towards the future and thinking about what you are going to do to get yourself in a better space. So that is the very first thing that I recommend doing, as well as understanding that this is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. Sure, there are going to be some people out there who can sprint through their debt freedom journey, people who can put excess amounts of money per month or per week towards their debt, but that's not going to be true or hold true for everyone. And so the quicker that you can realize that, I feel like the easier this journey, the easier embarking on this journey will be. So after you've kind of worked through the emotional process of getting started, the next thing that you got to do is sit down with yourself if you're embarking on this journey solo, or with your partner or whomever may be embarking on this journey with you, and run your credit report. There are 3 major credit bureaus that include TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, and you can get your credit report from one of those sources for free. In fact, I read on USA.gov that due to the pandemic, now until the end of 2023, you can actually get a free credit report each week, which is kind of wild. That might be a little excessive. I feel like getting an initial credit report is plenty enough, and maybe every 6 months or so would be fine. I don't know that getting one weekly is necessary, but that is a thing that's happening right now. But run your credit report. It's going to tell you who all you owe, how long you've owed them, how much money you have to go to pay off these creditors, to pay off whoever it is that you owe. It's going to tell you how much real estate debt you have. It's going to tell you your medical debt, your student loan debt, your car loan debt, your credit card debt. It's going to spill it out for you. Therefore, you don't have to guess. It's right there for you. So run your credit report. The next thing you want to do is add up all of the debt that you actually intend to pay off. There's really no real reason in focusing on your mortgage debt if you don't plan to make paying off your mortgage a part of your debt payoff plan. There's really no need to focus on a debt that you really can't pay. So I recommend just adding up, specifically if you're doing this with someone else, like a partner or a spouse, the debt that you actually intend to pay. Do that. Again, no point in focusing on your mortgage debt or whatever, because you got to make your monthly mortgage payment either way if you have a mortgage or a home loan. If you are not in a position to pay off that, which lots of people aren't, some people are. Some people have $20,000 left on their mortgage. A lot of people do not. So paying off one's mortgage might be a part of their plan, but otherwise, if it's not going to be a part of your debt freedom plan, even though technically it is still a debt, there's again no reason to kind of focus on that when it's not going to be a part of the plan. So you're adding up the debts that you actually intend to make a part of your plan and to pay off along this journey, especially of course the initial part of this journey. Sure, you might consider paying off your mortgage later on down the line, but if it's not a factor in the beginning because you owe $300,000 on your mortgage, then there's really no point of factoring it in. It's essentially like a non-factor at this point. So after you figured out who you owe and how much you owe them, you want to create a monthly budget. Really an annual budget, but of course an annual budget is made up of a bunch of monthly budgets. So you want to sit down and you want to figure out how to create this monthly budget. A lot of times people don't even have a budget in place. They don't know how much money they've brought in the past month. They don't know where their money has gone, how many expenses they've had or what their expenses were. So it's important to kind of figure out where you're starting and what you're working with before you can actually proceed to some of the next steps. So let's say it's the middle of January, which it technically is, or almost the end of January now, and you're looking to start this journey or start up fresh in February. Well, at this point, what you would want to be doing is trying to project how much income you think is going to come in for the month of February. A budget is just a spending and saving plan, which is just a projection. It's a plan. In a perfect world, life would go how we want it to go, but it doesn't. So you're just creating a plan. So you want to add up the money that you project will come in. If you don't know about anything that we're going to talk about regarding the budget, I need you to whip out your bank statements, your credit card statements, and go back at least 3 months to see how much income you have brought in. Some people don't receive paychecks that are essentially, like the exact amount. I do. I know the exact amount down to the cents of my paychecks and my husband's paychecks. That's not everybody is paid that frequency. So you want to make sure you're calculating how much money you are projecting to bring in or predicting that you will bring in that next month, which is February in this example. The next thing that you want to do is add up your expenses. Again, you may have to go back several months to figure out how much your expenses are, because some of them you may pay, you might have a quarterly subscription box or something like that, but you need to know from how much you're paying for everything from your mortgage or your rent payment, which is typically the most expensive expense that we have or most people have in any given month, all the way down to the 99 cents that you pay for Apple storage each month. You need to figure out where exactly your money is going. The more surprises that you can cut out, I feel like the more realistic the budget. Speaking of, when it comes to calculating your expenses, of course, we kind of just talked about those bills, those monthly recurring expenses, but also people tend to have expenses like groceries, toiletries, daycare, and gas and other expenses like that. Again, that's where running the bank statements and the credit card statements can be helpful. Unless you drive for a living, if you're just running to and from work and errands, calculating how much money you spent in gas in the previous month should do the trick for you. Now, when we're talking about food, like groceries and takeout and eating out, that may be a little different because you might come up with a number that is probably in excess. You might come up with a $2,000 number, and we all know that it probably doesn't require that much for the average household to use to eat each month. So some totals that you're going to get based on the research that you're doing, looking at your bank statements and your credit card statements, are going to be very realistic. Others might be unrealistic, and that's kind of where we're going to talk about how you can tweak some things to make a realistic budget. So if you spent $2,000 on food and groceries and eating out in the previous month, you might shoot for a more realistic budget, which might be something like $1,000. Because while I'm not talking a lot about how to increase income and decrease expenses in this video, the fact of the matter is, if you spent $2,000 on food in the previous month, but you realistically could eat off of $1,000 if you cut back in a few areas, then boom, just like that, you already can see that you have an extra or additional $1,000 that you can then know comfortably that you can apply to these goals that you're going to set. You can use that money now to actually start achieving some financial goals. When we're talking about realistic, again, you want to remember to add in those expenses that maybe you don't want, but that you have. If your kid has been doing gymnastics for the past year and you don't intend to pull them from gymnastics, well, then you're going to have to include that as part of your budget. That would be realistic for you. If you've had the income to support that previously, then you're probably going to have the income to support it moving forward. Even if you're creating a debt payoff plan or embarking on a debt payoff journey or debt freedom journey. So you want to include that because that's realistic to you and your finances in your family. On a monthly basis, sometimes it's hard to see the bigger picture. So I do recommend replicating that same budget for the rest of 2023. So if you create your budget for February, I do recommend replicating that month after month for the entire 2023, therefore technically creating an annual budget. And you can really see what you're going to be working with. You can really see how much you're spending on groceries per year. You can see how much you're spending on your mortgage per year, or spending on cable or your cell phone bill per year. And that is very telling. You also can see what is going to be left over after bills and expenses have been covered for the duration of the entire year, which again is way more telling. If you can look at your budget and you can see, oh, you know, if this is an actual realistic budget for us and we have $1,500 left over, and 1,500 times 11 is whatever amount it is, then you can see that starting this journey may not be too bad. You can see that maybe you are capable of more than what you thought you were, because you were, you know, kind of thinking about the present rather than the future. Also, do not forget to budget for those minimum payments. Even though you might not be trying to pay off your car loan, you still have a minimum payment that you have to pay. So you need to factor that into a bill, not really factoring that into debt. Yes, it is a debt, but really it's a bill. Whether you find that you have a bunch of money left over at the end of the month, or even a little amount at the end of the month, you still got to pay that minimum car payment. You still got to pay those minimum credit card balances. So yes, they're debt, but really they are bills, because you have to pay those either way. If you don't pay your mortgage payment for some months, if you don't pay your car payment for some months, then you probably won't have either of those. So they're more so like a bill, even though they are a debt. But either way, make sure you're factoring in those expenses. We need every expense accounted for so we can see how much money we're going to have left to work with. Even before we start slicing and cutting expenses, we need to know how much we have left to work with, which, like I said, will help aid and guide you as you move toward financial freedom. Because if you don't even know what those expenses are and how much money you're going to have left over at the end of the month after paying for all of your most important bills and expenses, then there's no real way that you're going to even be able to move forward to the next step, which we're going to talk about now. The next thing that you want to do is decide on a debt payoff method. Lots of folks will advocate for the debt snowball method, which is basically listing out your debts from smallest balance to largest, and then paying off those from smallest balance to largest. It helps build momentum, and then you can roll one payment into the next, which is the epitome of the snowball method. Other people might consider the avalanche method, which is paying off your debts from highest interests to lowest interests. Typically, people with a higher income, I feel like, navigate or gravitate towards that method. You also might consider consolidating your debt. I am not a huge fan of that, but essentially when you're consolidating your debt, you're taking lots of your previous debts and you're consolidating them into one new debt. And in doing so, some people may find that they have a better interest rate and they have just one payment instead of owing a bunch of different payments to a bunch of different creditors. So that's a route that some people take. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan, but some people do that and take that route. You kind of have to decide which one makes the most sense for you. The next thing that you might consider doing is putting all of your debts, or entering all of your debts, into a debt payoff calculator. There are apps and websites for that. One that I swear by is undebt.it. I'll have much of what I'm talking about linked down below in the description, but it's evolved over the years. But it's a place where you can go to enter in all of your debts, your interest rates, all of the different terms and leases, everything about each debt that you have, and it will calculate for you not only your debt freedom date, but it also shows you, how much money you need to put towards each debt, in any given year to be debt free at X amount of time. It will tell you how long it will take to pay off this debt. It will factor in some of the information that we were talking about related to the snowball method and all of that. So it's really helpful. Again, it's come a long way. So I highly recommend checking it out, because it takes the guesswork out of all of this, and you can just go forth and start and embark on this journey. The next thing that you have to do is stop adding debt. If you're trying to get out of debt, yet you're still swiping your credit card or taking out payday loans, then you're never going to make any real gains or progress, because it's essentially like hustling backwards. You're trying to go in this direction, yet you're really going in that direction. So you got to figure out a way to stop adding debt. Some people will freeze their credit cards, literally freeze them. Some people will cut them up. Some people will, after they've paid off X amount of debts, they will close the accounts. Kind of got to do whatever you think is going to work for you, but you have to stop adding debt, because otherwise you're just going to be adding debt instead of decreasing debt. One way to do this is to create an emergency fund. Again, this fund is going to have to be what feels right for you. Some people might say $500 is plenty. Some people might go for $1,000. Some people might go for $3,000 or a month's worth of expenses. But the fact of the matter is, you're going to have to build up some kind of cash cushion. So therefore, when an emergency does arise, you can cover it, unless a huge emergency comes up or you haven't saved up to cover this emergency. But you do want to save up a decent amount of money so that when emergencies arise, you can cover that emergency with cash instead of relying on debt and going further into debt. Do keep in mind that if you have to pause paying off debt because a huge expense has come up and you're going to have to take 3 months to save up the money to cash flow the expense as opposed to putting it on a credit card, you totally can do that. Again, this is likely going to be a marathon. You're not racing against anyone. So if you have to take off 3 months of paying off debt to pay off some large expense that has come up so that you don't add that as a debt and accrue more debt, then that's just what it has to be. So also don't be afraid to do that. So also do know that that is a completely viable option. The next thing that you want to do is decide on your other goals. Are you going to continue investing? Some people don't. Are you going to start sinking funds? Some people start those during their debt freedom journey. Are you going to save $50 per month into a savings account to add to your emergency fund a little bit? What are your other goals? Nowhere in the book of life or book of debt freedom does it, well, maybe it does, but as far as I'm concerned, nowhere does it say that you can only pay off debt and you cannot invest and you cannot save. You can do whatever you want to do with your money. So if you want to pay off debt and you want to invest at the same time, you see no reason to cut back your investing contributions. You see no reason to not get your company matched. You see no reason to not add, $50 here or there to a savings account for you or for your children or for your children's college or something like that. You don't have to. You can continue to do all the things simultaneously. The debt is going to get paid off if you have a plan and if you're sticking to the plan. So it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things if you're working towards other goals. Of course, you do have to keep in mind that if you're working towards other goals, then that is taking away money from the debt. But again, your debt's going to be paid off if you're sticking to a solid plan either way. And then the last thing that you have got to make sure that you're doing is making principal only payments. When you start making these extra debt payments, some of them you're going to have to make sure that they're going to the principal only. If you're paying off, putting extra money towards a credit card, that's a different thing. But if you're trying to pay off your car, you want to make sure that the extra payments that you make are going towards your principal balance. A lot of people want to pay off their interest, which I get it. It kind of makes sense to want to pay off the interest, but the interest is determined by the principal. So the higher the principal balance, the more interest you'll owe. That's how interest comes about, because you're paying interest on the principal. So technically, if you start decreasing the principal balance, then that's less interest that you owe over time. Sometimes you can't just log on to your portal and make an extra car payment and assume it's going to go to principal or try to route it to principal. Oftentimes you do need to call and talk to someone there, talk to an operator or a representative and tell them that you need this extra payment that you're making to go to only principal. Okay, you guys, so that is the strategy that we have lived by, that we continue to live by in order to become debt free. If you don't know, we are on a financial independence journey, which basically means we're trying to retire well before the traditional retirement age, which keeps getting pushed back further and further. Of course, one retires whenever they have enough money to do so. So there's no real retirement age per se, although sometimes you can't withdraw funds from this account or this account until you're a certain age, like Social Security. There's a specific age for that. So in essence, whenever we have the income to support that is when we will retire, and we're on track to, or hopefully are looking to retire much earlier than 60 something, preferably late 40s, but I don't know. We'll have to see. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and you found it to be helpful. If you did, give it a like, subscribe if you're new and if you're liking what you're seeing, and I will catch you guys right back here in a few days in a brand new video. Bye guys.